Dragula Titan Season 2 has officially wrapped up, and I am feeling all kinds of different ways about it. On one hand, I am very happy that Evah Destruction won. I've been following Evah's career for a very long time, since around that laugh track really starting to get viral on Tumblr, and so I'm happy to see them finally get a crown. On the flip side though, it does bum me out that JK didn't win. I was rooting so hard for Jay, like Tyra was rooting for Tiffany. I was rooting for Jaharia to shut up all of the freaking racists that have been going at her since she got moved through the Last Supper to the finale. And I wanted to be surprised. I wanted someone to give a fight to Evah because I knew that she was gonna go hard in this finale. In Dragula, when we see a contestant come back, like my very first thought is Dali. Dali went hard in that season and won. When Evah and Abora came back for Titans 2, I knew the two of them were 100% going to double down and commit everything to this season. It's not like in Drag Race where someone comes back again and their performance is mediocre at best. We are left wanting so much more from them because what did they give to us their second time around that they didn't do the first time? We'll see people come back for an All-Stars and kind of just get pushed to the finale because they're a production favorite, but not because they're actually doing anything that's surprising or interesting. Dragula Titans is not that formula at all. Evah and Abora genuinely made their way to the finale based on their own merit, and week after week were consistent. That being said, so were Jaharia and Jay. I've read JK's Instagram story about how this was a really difficult time for them, and there were a lot of things going against them for the finale. I don't want to read too fiercely into Jay because I can only imagine how tough that was. And I know that he watched one of these reviews and left a comment on it. So Jay, if you're watching, just know I stan you really hard. I will always be Team JK. I hope the best for all of these contestants, but I especially hope the best for JK and Jaharia because I know that they're getting a lot of nastiness online from people who could never even dream about being good at Drag 1 and couldn't even fathom being interesting enough that someone in casting would want to bring them to a televised reality show. Anyway, let's get into this. The end is finally here for Titans 2. It has been a great journey seeing the growth of each one of these contestants, and I think they all made their way to the finale by their own merit. I think each one of them deserved their spot in the finale. It's tough because no matter who wins this finale, there's going to be upset and there's going to be vitriol online. And I think as the Drag Race fandom starts to seep out of the cracks of what Ruin Production do with their shenanigans, those audience members are looking for somewhere to go. They're finding another show that they can latch onto, whether that's during the downtime of Drag Race or they're just fed up with Ruin Production. So they go and look for another drag competition. They stumble into Dragula, it ticks enough boxes for them, and then they start to bring a lot of that toxicity from the Drag Race fandom. And so it's kind of hard because no matter who wins, it's gonna be rough for everybody else, and it's gonna be rough for the winner. That being said, I hope this cast and the Boulets are so proud of what they've done this season. They took the formula of All-Stars and Titans, they managed to perfect that formula and created something genuinely spectacular and jaw-dropping all season. The mix of monsters that they chose, from finalists to people who had high amounts of energy and charisma, I think was a fantastic mix. It's been a killer season of Titans, certainly better than a lot of the theatrics of season 1, and I'm excited to see what the Boulets do next. At the beginning of the episode, the Ghoulies are getting caught up on all the drama that happened during Last Supper, and I want to say as one final exclamation point to a lot of this talking point, if y'all are very activated by anything that was said during the Last Supper, pour some of that energy into being positive towards the diva you love. If you feel bad for Dahlia or Sigourney, don't go and attack the other monsters for saying something, because we weren't in the room. We do not get to impose our own feelings about the matter because the ones that were there are the ones who get to determine how they feel about it. We get to support these monsters, buy their merch, go to their shows, tip them from their socials because I'm sure a lot of them have links. Put some of that negative, nasty energy into something productive and add positivity to the person that you like. I think I said positivity weird, but I'm not gonna go back and record that line again. I already blocked some people for being racist in the last video that I made. I am literally not joking. If there is even slight microaggressive sideways comments about Jaharia or Jay, I am deleting and blocking that shit. It is totally okay to have your opinion on if you think that someone didn't deserve a spot or deserved a spot or that somebody's drag isn't for you, but y'all don't gotta be nasty. So let's get directly into these final floor show looks. I think that Evah was the most successful among the entire group because she was thinking about a through line. When you have 4 looks you have to do, the thought should be cohesion between each one of those. These aren't creations that live on an island like we normally see with horror, filth, glamour. These are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so they kind of have to exist in the same universe together in my mind. And I think that's where Evah succeeded. I think Jay and Jaharia both kind of thought about each look as their own separate thing. I think Abora tried to bring us into the wonderful world of Abora, kind of cartoon world that all of the looks lived in. But even still, all those looks didn't quite mesh with each other. They were quite isolated, where Evah thought about doing a full collection. All of these looks exist in the same comic series or the same D&D campaign, the same video game, or the same card collection. And I think that, beyond the general execution, is what pushed them to the top. We'll do category by category, starting with Pestilence. Jaharia is inspired by COVID, but I wasn't really getting COVID. I was kind of just getting snot and boogers. This to me was monstrous. The green jelly blob I think was fascinating in its construction, and I was kind of enamored by the silly presentation of it because it was all very absurd to me. I was getting the vibe of the Sinking City video game, almost like a Cthulhuian style monster, but as snot. The open pustules were rancid and filthy, which is exactly what I wanted for this look. Evah was this creepy, gross-looking witch. I was getting Baldur's Gate. I was getting the story of a creature that early in a campaign you'd run into. She'd sell you some type of potion that really was a poison. You have to take her out as one of the early bosses. I found it graphic in nature. I love the little details of all the faces on the garment. It totally was reminding me of the interior of Aunt Ethel's cave. And the attention to detail of all those little flies everywhere was impressive. This clearly took a lot of work and effort to put together. I don't want to read JK too fiercely for any of these looks, but I was quite underwhelmed by this very first look, and it kind of set everything off to be on a track of, that's not gonna be very good tonight, is it? And that makes me sad because I was super rooting for him to win. The little elevator music that they put behind him, even the editors wanted us to know that this was a chop. I think that shiny linen looking fabric over the PVC was a bad choice. And I think going forward, every critique I have of Jay begins and ends with fabric choice. The open back with the exposed undergarments, I think was a really big miss that should have had some type of closure. And then the boots were a really awful stylistic choice. I kind of wish that the Boulets gave them some type of stipend so that they could have created their looks, give them like 5K each that they could construct their finale garments with. I think that would have given a lot of assistance to people like Jay, who, according to their story on Instagram, was struggling financially. Something would have been helpful at the very end. I don't know if that's even possible or conceivable, but I think that would have greatly assisted all of them and would have been a great jumping point for creating these final looks. And then Abora for this category was an actual jaw-dropping moment. The production value of this performance needs to be studied. Crawling out from the side of the stage after that Abora cloud lifted up into the rafters was such a spine-chilling moment. I literally felt goosebumps going all the way up my body, seeing Abora's charred body coming out from this radioactive fallout, finding pieces of their loved ones everywhere and panicking that they were left alive through all of this. All the carnage and viscera was sick in the head, but it was so spectacular, and I think an interesting twist for this category. I think you easily could have used this for something like war, and I think starting out with such a big impressive look, it kind of blew the entire package load because nothing ever really met the expectation of what this one was. That being said, this is one of the most impressive things I've seen on Dragula based on the performance and presentation alone. So my ranking for this category was Abora, Evah, Jaharia, then Jay. And there will be golf rules at the end of this. Next category is Famine. I loved Evah walking out, luxuriating with this skeleton and then just chucking him like Rose at the end of Titanic. That glam bodysuit with the flesh rhinestoning was impeccable detail. And I think that red popped severely on the stage. This was a great look, and I loved the styling of this bone creature. And what I really loved was the incorporation of the multi-laces. We saw lace on the back of the garment trailing off of it, and then we saw that kind of basketball shoelace that was tying up the garment. The mixed textures were cool to look at, and I found this impressive. That being said, my cultural sensitivity button was being tip-tapped a little bit. Not trying to make an issue where there wasn't one. It was very creature-like, so it kind of takes it out of the human earth world, but it did make me think, Abora is inspired by greedy monopolies, which I think was an interesting choice to make here. Unchecked capitalism is a problem that is causing famines globally daily. So this was really finger on the pulse for conversations that are already being had across the world, I think. I like the way that the costume inflated, and those tiny arms that were floating all over the place were quite scary. It was giving me Little Nightmares meets Monopoly. I did think that it got stagnant after a while. I kind of wish that it unhooked from the rafters so that Abora could kind of go crazy and inflate that costume all over the stage and really just be everywhere going wild, not just stuck in one place. Jaharia was meant to be a swarm of locusts, and I think this was one of the most interesting concepts of her entire package. I enjoyed the presentation and how dramatic and creepy the walk was. Those gold strings that were hanging out of the mouth were nasty. I wish that there were little locusts or bugs flying around her so that it really looked like a swarm of them coming. And I want to talk about the cohesiveness of the collection, because where Evah is already succeeding so far is weaving stories together. And that last look you could easily see in the same campaign. You come out of the bog and head up the river, and there's this river witch that's there. But this look, when I think about Swarm of Locusts, I think ancient Egypt. How does that connect with 2020 COVID? And so I think there was a lack of cohesion already. I love the color palette of Jaharia using earth tones with these gold flecks, but I do think it got dry after a little bit. I wish that there was one pop of color somewhere on it. And I also wish that there was something on the skirt beyond the aging of the colors, just to give it that little push to the next stage. And then Jay's look is meant to be Victorian inspiration. It was almost this tree spirit that couldn't consume anything, and I found that to be visually striking and kind of horrific. The performance did get dull for me after a little while, beyond the costume being, I think, lower scale than some of the others that we saw already. And I think this could have been peak elegance and just didn't get there. My ranking for this category was Evah, Jaharia, Abora, then Jay. Next category is war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Evah starts us out with this gladiator style monster. Yo! The stage presence was eerily captivating. It was kind of sensual. It was commanding. This was such a moment during the floor show, and likely one of my favorite looks that I've ever seen on Dragula ever. This was definitely a mid-game boss that fucks you up and makes you realize that you did not grind hard enough, that if you happen to beat them, you're gonna have to go backwards and level up like crazy if you want to keep progressing. The metalwork of those chains and swords was so goddamn impressive. And then the metallic teeth were the final touch to make this look perfect. I even love that small detail of the little sword earrings. Like, Evah was thinking about this whole look 360. Then we got to that performance where the sword was lit on fire and my jaw dropped. This was a huge wow moment, and I think was definitely needed in the performances, because everything so far has just been like, whoa, that's cool. This one was a gasp. Jaharia is presenting a Greek warrior. I found the entire look to be a little Halloween costume store. I didn't like that the armor piece did not have any type of connection to the back. And then that animal print blanket material that was just dangling off the back really did not grab me and I did not connect with. Jay for this category I think gave one of the best looks. I like the commentary of talking about the American military machine, making gun commentary. I think that is important. For me, it just didn't push hard enough with the look. The rotators on those Gatling guns was so impressive, I will say. But what I found most frustrating was that it was just a red morph suit underneath it all. There wasn't any contouring or highlighting or body spray or anything to try and make the colors pop. It was just a flat red. All the attention to detail went into the cannons and kind of got left out of the suit. And then Abora is last, giving what I think is the most understated look we've ever seen from Abora, right next to the Rocky Horror look that we got a couple of weeks ago. The makeup was very puss. I love the simplicity of the look underneath it all, but the performance obviously fell apart. And the editors gave us what I want to see, and I think a lot of us want to see. Show us some of the mistakes. Show us some of the problems so that we understand why somebody didn't win. Dragula loves to show the heightened, realized version of someone's drag in its utter perfection. But then when someone doesn't win a challenge, we as the audience, I think, get confused. Why did they lose if we didn't see them fail? So showing Abora's sword falling apart and then all the prop malfunctions helps me as an audience member understand that maybe this was too over choreographed. Maybe Abora went through everything so much that it weathered the props, that they could not fire as they needed to. Whatever the case was, there were malfunctions and it did not reach its full potential. And then the earthbending as soon as the sword broke was not the vibe for me. And the last category is death. Jay is first out, and he was meant to be representing the cycle of the moon. How the moon waxes and wanes, how there's the new moon and the death moon. And I think that's an interesting perspective, but it doesn't have a through line from the rest of the looks. I think the crescent moon pieces and the way they were stuffed gave a little extra texture that needed to be there. That being said, I liked some of the materials that were used in constructing them. I think the fringe and the stonework were fire. I think my biggest problem is that I would never look at this and think that it was meant to be a horseman of the apocalypse. Abora's next and is on stilts once again, even having someone to be the butt of the horse. That's something I'm so glad I never had to do in school plays, was be the butt of somebody. This was meant to be a death machine, which I wasn't really getting the inspiration from that. I was sort of getting Trojan horse. Speaking of Trojans, there was a giant dong on this look, so I will not be including the visuals for monetization purposes. But if you want to see this, you can open up your Shudder subscription and watch the floor show on your own. I did like that piece. I could not imagine sitting on that though, if that was Abora's cape. Ultimately, I felt bad for Abora because this was not the finale that I'm sure that they wanted to have. And it made me sad to see these things fall apart and not work the way they were supposed to. Because that's not how you want to be seen for the last time on Dragula or any reality show. You want to be seen at your best. And this was not their best. Evah is next, giving me another wow moment. This fairy person who is bringing over the souls of the dead across the river to their next destination. And what I got was a restrained performance, which I think the entire collection desperately needed. Something that was a little softer in presentation, something that was a little more glam than the rest. This blended horror and glam in such a beautiful and perfect way, and I loved these subtle moments of this death creature almost looking sad, like they are mourning every single soul that they ferry. This was the best way to put a bow on the entire package. Jaharia was meant to be a soul eater. I think the scale was really impressive. It was very nature-like in its own way, and that witchy foreskin hood was a great design moment. While I appreciated that the mannequins had both of her eliminated looks, one from the D&D challenge and then the one from the supervillain challenge, I thought that the scale of those were kind of flat. I wish that they had been padded, or maybe even that those had been crew members that were in those costumes. With them being flat on the mannequins, it sort of went to a herp-de-derp rather than a, whoa, those were her elimination costumes. And she's absorbing these failure moments to make herself better, learning and growing from her mistakes. My ranking for this group was Evah, Jaharia, Jay, then Abora. And so, golf rules, the top of the pack is Evah with 5 points, Jaharia with 10 points, Abora with 12 points, and JK with 13 points. Now, if you are not a golf person, whoever has the lowest score in golf is the winner. So for me, I think that the winner was very clearly Evah. I've already said so many positives about the idea of forming a collection around these 4 looks, and I love the performance and storyline of each one of them. I love how their mind worked throughout this finale, and I would love to see each one of those characters translated through a trading card. I am so glad that Jaharia got to be here for this finale, and I think shut down a lot of those haters. There were some misses in the collection, and I think that break that they talked about taking right after the Last Supper was very clearly seen here. It reminded me of this moment on one of the old Project Runway seasons where Tim went to go do his walkthroughs in the houses to see where all the designers were at, and the person that was getting ready for the finale had only done 3 looks because they went back to work for a couple of weeks and hadn't started their collection until the week before Tim's visit. And it's like, girl, you have a finale coming up in 2 weeks. You are not going to be able to be ready in time for this. The looks definitely needed a little bit of refinement and a polish, and I think that Jaharia could have won. They're one of the better performers of this group, and I think they have a really amazing way of thinking, comparable to what Evah does. And I hope that she embraces her stardom even more because she is a superstar. Abora started so strong with that atomic look, and then everything else was just a slow downhill descent to an inevitable prop malfunction yet again. And I think overall Abora was a bit too ambitious with their goals of trying to create these big sceneries, and just nothing matched up with the scale of what the outfits wanted to be. Jay I was the most sad for in this finale because I wanted to see him win. I understand where his problems began now that I've seen the Instagram post. I'm still sad nonetheless. And I hope that he can embrace his star power too. And I just hope that he knows that he is better than what was presented here. What happened in this moment is not a reflection of who he is as a drag artist, that his drag is valid and good, and he has great ideas and concepts and execution. And people like me are gonna be Team JK forever and always rooting for his success. Evah cleared this finale that is completely undeniable. It had a very good run throughout the season. So when Victoria, Elizabeth Black, my mother spiritually, showed up as this rotten corpse to present the crown and gave it to Evah, I was very excited. Now, was I extremely excited because Victoria Elizabeth Black was there and looked killer? Absolutely. But also, so did Evah. I love that the dress was almost like a scroll that had been wrapped around her body, and she had that quill that was right down the arm. Like, this is the dungeon master right here who's been writing out the entire campaign and created all of these characters for the main players to experience. Now the campaign is over and they get to get the loot at the end of the dungeon. And I hope that Evah is very proud of what they did in this finale. That is the end for Dragula Titan Season 2, which means there's gonna be a void in my heart until next year, until the next Dragula season. But I really appreciate all of you who came back very consistently week to week and chatted with me about this season, about the looks and your thoughts on them. I'm so happy that this season was as good as it was, and it makes me excited for whatever's next. If you are interested in Canada's Drag Race, I will be continuing to discuss that as we go forward, and I have a bunch of video projects that I'll be working on since we will have one less drag project to talk about. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see y'all on the flip.